So this is part 2 of the basic editing tutorial. We're back on our A group photo and I've moved it over to Photoshop. We were doing the first half of this tutorial in Aperture or any of your RAW or NEF editing software that you have, and now this is brought over as a TIFF. You can also bring it over as a JPEG into an editing software. You can do a lot of editing in those RAW software programs, but I'm more comfortable in Photoshop, so I have a little bit more freedom. This is just where I learned how to do it. I was kind of self-taught on the matter at a photo studio that I worked at for a little while. So we're gonna go ahead and finish editing this photo. I don't dislike the photo as it is. I think it has a really nice background, and I could stop here, but I'll show you at the end of this video the before and after, and you can see the difference between the two. So the things that I want to do to this photo are going to be really basic. I want to put a vignette on it. There's already some dark spots in the background. I just kind of want to round it out. And then I'm going to bring a little bit more attention to the face of the bird, which I like doing in a lot of portrait shots, is to really bring attention to the center of your photo, or not necessarily the center, but the focus of your photo. Your eyes are naturally going to go to the lightest parts of the picture first. So if you were to close your eyes and look at this picture and open them, your eyes are probably going to go to the ridge. That's a little bit lighter than the rest of the bird first. You can try it out if you don't believe me. So we want to make sure that the eye also has a lot of pull, a lot of draw as well. So the first thing you're going to do in Photoshop, you don't have to do this step. I'm guilty of forgetting to do it quite a bit, but since I definitely want to show you the before and afters, I'm going to go ahead and go over to my layers panel. And I'm going to duplicate my layer, which is basically making another copy of the same picture that I was working on. When I work on this layer, if I were to mess up halfway through, or if I didn't like it, I can turn off this layer and go back to my original picture. I can delete the layer and start over. I can erase parts of the layer and leave other parts. So it becomes really handy when we get into the more difficult editing techniques that we will be covering in this series. So go ahead and make that second layer, and that way you can test your progress. There's two different methods you can use for adding a vignette and changing the light and darkness of a picture. The first one that we're going to look at is the burn and dodge tool. You can use your burn tool, which is like a little finger pinching on a thumb, and you're going to want to check up in the upper left-hand corner of your Photoshop browser that you have your midtones or shadows selected. You don't want your highlights for this part. In this particular photo, I'm going to be burning the edges, which means to make it darker, and I don't have any highlights on the edges here, so that wouldn't work so well. Also, you want to make sure the exposure is set to a low number. It's out of 100%, and you want a number that's between 5 and 10. You can adjust what works well for you, but you want this to be a gradual change. So you're going to use this like a paintbrush, and you want to make sure that the diameter is really big. If you had something really tiny, it's not going to work so well. You want this to be like a big, soft, flowy paintbrush that's helping you make this really nice vignette. And as you notice while I'm doing this, it's very gradually going to darken up the edges of this photo to make it nice and smooth. We had a little hiccup there with the computer processor. I was doing something a little silly there. So that was the midtones. If I wanted to go in, again, I can do it with the shadows. It's going to be a more dramatic effect with that. And make sure that this is nice and smooth. So all we did there was make sure that the vignette was just a little bit stronger than it was before. So let's go ahead and turn off this layer. You can see what I've done there. Just a real gradual change, making sure that focus is on the bird. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my dodge tool over here. And this time I want it to be on either midtones or highlights, because we're going to go into this part of the bird and really call attention to it. Again, you want your exposure to be in a low number between 5 and 10, and we're going to paint a lighter streak on this bird here and make sure that it is nice and even textured for us. And here's a before and an after. So you can see really subtle, but it just changes the focus so much from what is a good photo to what is a much better photo. The second technique that you can do, and this changes between photo to photo, I don't necessarily have a favorite way, it just really depends on what you need to do. I'm going to back up past all that burning and dodging. And I'm going to show you the lasso tool paired with a feather tool, or I'm sorry, the levels tool. So the lasso needs to be feathered to about 200 or 250. And again, that's the gradient between the area that you're affecting and that you're not. And this allows you to really customize the area that you're vignetting. So if those are the areas that I want to vignette, I can select around them, right click, and select the inverse. So that's selecting all this outer edge that I wanted to affect with my vignette. I'm going to press Command or Control, if you're on a PC, Command L, and that's going to bring up a Levels panel. And this Levels panel is showing you a histogram again. Now it's okay that this histogram isn't in the middle like we wanted our general histogram to be, because you're not selecting the whole photo. And we actually want this to be on the darker side. So I'm going to take my midtones, which is right here in the center, and I'm going to pull it down so that it's darker. If you go up, you're going to see that you're going to get a white effect. If you pull all the way down, it's going to turn black. So you want somewhere in the middle that's not unrealistic, but that still has a nice effect. When you're done, you can go ahead and deselect your selection, and we're going to reselect the area around here that we want to draw attention to. You're going to press Command L again. And this time we want to affect those highlights. So we want to make sure that the highlights in here, or the midtones, are brought up a little bit. So you can either test it out this way, see what you like. I don't like what any of those are doing. I'm going to go ahead and come back over here to the highlights, bring it up a little bit, and that's going to help my picture out. If I'm still not happy with the effect, I can select even a smaller area. Do it again. Bring up those highlights. So now you're really focused on that eye again. So this is the before, and this is the after. There's not a whole lot more I would do with this photo. Again, it was a pretty simple one. I am going to flatten my layers. Go ahead and save it. Mine auto saves back into Aperture. We're going to stop over to Aperture real quick because I wanted to show you something real quick. This is the original photo before we touched it in Aperture in the first part of this video. When we did our Aperture changes, this is what it turned into. And then when we brought it to Photoshop, we made it look like that. So it's a pretty long change between the original, which was still a good photo, into a photo that you can really be proud of and want to put on your wall. So I hope this helped with your basic editing techniques. Please stay tuned for the next in the series, which I believe is going to be on how to prepare your photos for the web. That includes resizing, sharpening, and even putting a watermark on your photo. So thanks a lot. You can visit us at hq-animalawareness.deviantart.com. And again, I'm Denise, signing off for this tutorial.